This video is sponsored by Sketchfab. In this one, I'll be modeling this character right here from a base mesh that we made in a previous video. This one isn't like my usual follow-along style tutorials, it's more about showing my process, hopefully to give you some ideas on how to start modeling your own characters. If you like character modeling, I have a challenge going on right now, sponsored by XPPen. Submit your characters on my Discord server, and if you get first place, XPPen will send you one of their DECO L drawing tablets. You can find more info about the challenge on Discord or in this video right here. Also, check out my Patreon for all of the project files for my videos, coupon codes for free Gumroad products, and stuff I don't share anywhere else. I've been posting early access videos over there, as well as recordings from the few live streams I've done. I also donate a portion of the profits to environmental causes each month. Links for everything are in the description. Here's a summary of what I'll cover. I'll start by bringing in the base mesh from the other video, as well as a reference that I drew. I'll go through each part of the base mesh and alter stuff until the shapes match a little closer, and some of the modifiers will be applied so I can add more detail to parts like the pant legs and sleeves. I'll add some new objects for all the face parts, the hat, suspenders, and cane. Once the modeling is done, I'll add materials. I'll briefly talk about rigging, and I'll show the lighting setup for the final render. Alright, let's get started. Alright, here we are in Blender. I'm using version 3.1 for this one. So first thing I'm going to do is bring in that base mesh from the other video. So I'm just going to go to File, Append, and then track down that file. And once we find the file, I'm going to go to Collections and then choose Character. This is the first one that we created in that video. And if you watched the last video, you'll know that I started with the same base mesh. So I'm actually going to create 3 characters in total, and they're all going to be starting with the same base mesh. So with all of these selected, I'm just going to hit Alt-G, and it should snap it to the center right there. And we're going to be creating an old guy character, so I'll just rename this old guy. Now I'll bring in a reference that I drew. It's a very rough reference. I actually only drew it once. What I'm going to do is use the head from this one right here and the body right here. So I'll just scale that down, and I'll just put it next to it, and I'll push it back so that it doesn't get in the way too much. So before I start modeling, I'm just going to go up here and make sure we have cavity turned on. That's just going to make our model a little easier to view. And I'm also going to add a matte cap right here and change it to this normals one. So I'm just going to go through our body parts right here and alter them to make them a little more similar to the drawing over here. So I'll start with the legs first. I'm just going to change the mirror object to the head, and then I'll rotate this -90 degrees on the Z-axis and move it out a little like that. I'll take the body and I'll flatten it a little on the bottom. Make sure you're in X-ray mode for this. Also take this top part and extrude that up so we have a slight, like a little neck basically. I'm just gonna move them back to the center right here and go into edit mode, and I'm actually gonna delete the feet because we're gonna add separate objects for the feet for the shoes basically. So delete that. I'll delete this loop right here, or dissolve it with Control X. I'll select this top face, rotate it, and I want to close this bottom one off, so select that and hit F. The legs are pretty slim and they don't change thickness too much, so I'll make sure this reflects that. With the bottom face selected, I'll just inset that to make it a little sharper, and we'll do the same thing for the top. I'll move this so the bend isn't nearly as severe. I don't want it to be completely straight because having a slight bend will make it a little easier to rig. Now it looks like our arms don't vary too much in thickness either, so I can come in here and change that. And I'll make the hands a little smaller. We might have to adjust the thickness of some of the knuckles so that they're not, clipping too much. This is just a thing that you have to work with when you're using the skin modifier for hands like that. And then for the head, let's try to match that shape. It's definitely more round right here. I'll select some of these loops like this, and I'll just scale them on the Z-axis by 0 to flatten them out. That way we're working with some more level lines to start with. Now I want to scale up some of the loop cuts around this edge right here. So I just keep checking my reference to see how close it looks. I think adding a loop cut in the middle will help me dial in that shape a little better. Now I'll work on the sleeves and the pants. I'll start with the sleeves first. What we have to do is apply the skin modifier because otherwise we don't really have any topology to mess with in here. So I'll apply this, and then we'll go into edit mode, And I'm just going to extrude a part around here to make this sleeve. So I'll just add a loop cut with Control R and scale that up. And we can take this loop right here and drag it in like that. And to make this a little sharper in there, we can hit N to open up the side panel. Under Item, we'll just turn the mean crease all the way up. So I'll take this and slide that back. And I'm going to scale this one up. We can also give this some crease too, to create some definition right there. Now let's work on the pants right here. So I'm going to do the same thing basically. I just want to apply some of the subdivision surface modifier because right now we only have this to work with. And I want a little more detail. So let's turn off optimal display, go into wireframe, and I'll just turn down these levels until it looks like enough detail. We'll apply that, and then I'll add another one on top with Control 2, just so it smooths out afterward. Now we should be able to go into edit mode, and first thing I want to do is figure out where the bottom of the pants are. We're going to make the socks and the pants one single mesh that are connected. I think maybe this loop right here, I'll just select that, and I actually want to slide that up, and I'm going to add another loop, and we'll just scale that out. So now we can do a similar thing that we did for the sleeves, bring it up, and I'll add an edge crease so it's sharp. So I just want the pant leg right here to bow out a little bit. It doesn't need to bow out all that much. Also, I want to make the legs right here a little skinnier. So I can select this loop right here and scale that down until it's about as thin as I think it should be. And I can just do that for all these loops also. And if we want to sharpen this at all, we can either add a loop cut or we can just select this and turn the crease up. And now I want to add some detail for the sock right here to make it look kind of ruffled. So to do that, I'll just come in here. First, I think I'll dissolve that because we're going to be adding some more loops in here. I'll bring a loop up here like that just to contain these loops. Okay, and now I'll turn on proportional editing up here like that. And I'll turn on connected only, and we'll just start coming through here. Make sure you scroll to make this a little, smaller. I think what I'll do actually is turn this off first. I'll come through here and just start, taking some of these loops like this, and then I'll scale them out with Shift Z so that they're not scaling up and down. Scale them out like that first, so we are starting off with some kind of like ribs basically. Now I'll turn this on and I'll just start grabbing points and just kind of dragging them around a little to just add some like randomness so they don't look so regular. You can drag them down. You can select whole loops and drag them down like that to create more like tight bunches. If you want, you could also apply the mirror modifier so these don't look nearly as symmetrical. I think it's fine though. We can just grab, random parts, start dragging them around, dragging them down, create some randomness. I like to always look at this from a distance to see if any parts look just a little too wrong. I think like maybe these pieces look like they're sticking out a little too far, so I'll drag some of these in slightly. I think that looks a little better, and it does look like kind of ruffling fabric. So next, let's work on the shoes right here. So I'll start off with a cube just as the basic shape, and then I'll try to kind of get this silhouette right here. So what I'll do is just duplicate this so that we don't have to make these modifiers over here. Then in edit mode, I'll delete everything. And actually in object mode, I'll hit Alt-G so it's in the center. Then back in edit mode, that's when I'll create the cube. And I'll drag that up by 1 meter. So that way when I scale it down, it scales from the bottom instead of the center. Now I'll just turn the subdivision surface off for now. And I'll drag that to the side and kind of get a scale that looks okay. I'll apply the scale and turn this back on. Now let's just go into edit mode and start, making that silhouette. So I'll add a loop cut right here so that we can drag this down to create a slight curve. I'll do the same thing right here. We can drag this part down. So we're starting to get the silhouette already. I think I'll add this so that we can create a slight bump like that. Now you can isolate an object if you hit the slash on the numpad. So I'll do that so I can see it from the top a little better. And we can start rounding some of these parts out. I'll just scale parts on the x-axis. And I'm going to want this to be sharp on the bottom. So I'll just select this loop around the edge like that. And temporarily, I'm just going to mark this as sharp with a mean crease so that I can, work on the silhouette a little more accurately. At the end, I will add some loop cuts instead to replace this. So I can delete this top face right here. That's where our foot is going to go in. So delete that face. Okay, so now I think I'll take these loops and turn the crease all the way down because I'm going to add some edge loops right here. I'll just scale that by 0 on the y-axis to flatten it out. And I'm going to scale that in a little on the y-axis to kind of pinch it, and it will kind of create a more of a curve right there. And we can do that from the front also on the x-axis. I think we might need a supporting loop. So I'll do one right above, right here, and I'll scale that on the z-axis by 0 also. Now this should allow us to scale this one out a little. I think I should be able to scale some of these in a little, help out with the shape. Now the closer we bring these together, the tighter they will get. So I'm going to create another loop right about here. Okay, and I want to create like a split for the heel. There's like a split right here, maybe right about here. Select these edges like that and right click, edge split. Now these should be separate pieces right here. And I just have to clean this up a little by selecting these two right here and connecting them, and then we can close off some of these faces. So I'll just select these right here and hit F, and that should close it off. We can do the same thing on the other side. And I'll just have to move some of these around. So what I'll do is select all of these bottom faces right there, and I will inset them like that to make it a little sharper. When we smooth it out and turn this up, it looks a little better. We can sharpen this out a little more too by adding another loop cut. And I also want to create a tongue area, so I'll add another loop. I just want to select some of these edges right there and right click, edge split. And now I will add a solidify modifier, and I'm just going to put that before the subdivision surface and turn the thickness up a little. Now in edit mode, we can slide some of these around. Also take these and maybe bring them in. And I think if we put a loop right here, we can kind of round it out a little better. Next, I'll create the little pants area right here. So that I am just going to duplicate the body right here. I'll turn off optimal display, maybe turn this down to this point right here and apply it. Now I'll add a solidify and I'll go into edit mode and I'll just delete some of these faces until we're at this pants level right here, maybe right around there. And I'll just delete those. Now we should be able to turn the offset. So I'll add a subdivision like that so it smooths it out just a little bit. For the suspenders, I'm going to do something a little different. What I'll do is start with a curve, and I'll just use a Bezier curve right here. And I'll turn on face snapping like that and turn that to median. And I'll drag this up right there. And basically just start tracing the path of where I want the suspenders to go. But first, I'm just going to select this and hit V and turn this to vector so they're flat. Now I'll just extrude this and start placing it, and if I hold control, it'll snap to the face down the other side. Put this right above the shoulder. And I'm going to make it cross in the back, so put one in the center and then put one down here and just move this up until it's relatively straight. Now I'll select all of these, hit V again and change that to automatic, and it will smooth it out quite a bit. I think this might need another one in between here, so I'll select both of those and subdivide that. No, should place one in the center. And we can just play with these shapes until it looks good. I'm just trying to make this so it sits pretty close to the top of the surface without clipping through too much. Okay, so to give this some thickness, we can do plenty of things within the curves right here, but I prefer using geometry nodes, so I'm just going to go to the geometry nodes workspace right here. With this still selected, I'll hit new, and that should create a new geometry nodes modifier. I want to do curve to mesh right here. And for the profile curve, I'll use a quadrilateral. It's just like a rectangle, basically. We'll plug that into the curve. We need to make this quite a bit smaller, so I'll turn this down, and I want this to be wider. So I'll maybe turn this down to like 0.005 and set this to 0.02 like that, so it's a little wider. And we should be able to, well, first of all, we'll fill the caps. And if we come in here, we should be able to change the tilt. So I'll select this and hit Control T like that, and we can spin that around. Go through all these and spin them so that they're conforming a little better. And you can also access the tilt from the end side panel right here. Just select the bottoms, Control T, like that. I'm sure you notice we're just creating one strap right now. What we'll do after is mirror it, so we don't actually have to create two straps. And when we have this the way we want it, just apply a mirror modifier right here. You can go back to layout, and that's what it looks like right now. Instead of applying it here, if you try to apply it, it won't work. It says you need to transform the curve to a mesh. And to do that, it's pretty easy. All you have to do is right click this and convert to mesh. And when you do that, everything will be applied in there for you. Now, so it's not as smooth on the edges like that. Let's go to Object Data Properties, Normals, make sure Auto Smooth is turned on. And we can turn that down quite a bit, around 60, and that will make the edges sharp like that. Now, I want to create kind of like a little patch right here so we don't see this intersection. Well, I'll rename this Suspenders, and then I'll create that patch with a plane. So bring in a plane, and in edit mode, I'll rotate this 45 degrees on the Z-axis, so it's like a diamond. And I'll scale this down quite a bit. I still have face snapping enabled, so I'll just drag it up here with G and hit Control like that. And I'll just rotate this until it's flat against that. I'll scale it down a little. I want to make sure that it's like covering this intersection. And if you want it to be perfectly centered, just make sure that the X is 0. Now I'll add a solidify, and you want to make sure you apply the scale for that modifier to work correctly. I'll change the offset to 0 so it's pushing in both directions, a little below 0 like that. In edit mode, select these two right here and scale them in. Apply subdivision surface, and I'll use a bevel modifier also. Just put that above the subdiv. I'll change this to %, and you can see it's a little sharper now, and when we turn this up, it'll get smoother. If we want, we can also change the segments to make it even sharper. I don't know what to call this, I'll just call it patch. Let's take a little break to talk about the sponsor, Sketchfab. Sketchfab is an online marketplace where you can buy and sell 3D models. They have more than 3 million models to check out over there, and if you use their importer add-on for Blender, you can get models into your scene super quickly. Looking at their models is really enjoyable because you can inspect them in the browser to see them from any angle. This way you know exactly what you're getting. Click the link in the description to check out Sketchfab. Now we get to work on the head, which I think is the fun part. We have the glasses right here. I have it drawn as just 2 circles. We're going to keep it pretty simple. So for this, I will add a plane right here, and I'm going to subdivide that immediately with maybe Control 3. Scale that down in edit mode quite a bit. Rotate that 90 degrees on the x-axis. Now I just want to bring this up where the eyes should be, and I'll drag that out, and we can add a solidify. I'll push the offset the opposite way. I'll add a bevel and just turn it up very, very slightly. And I just want it to be slightly rounded on the edges. So now when we shade it smooth, we can also turn on harden normals and auto smooth, and it'll look a little nicer for us. I'll add a mirror modifier and choose the head as the mirror object. Now we'll move on to the nose, and for that I am just going to create a cube. Control A, add in a cube. I'm going to scale that down quite a bit in edit mode. Then I'll drag this up here, and I just want to make sure this is in the very center. I'll hit Control 3, add a subdivision surface. And if we want, we can change the shape a little. Make sure that you apply the scale of any of these things so that the modifiers are working properly. Alright, so next we'll work on the mustache right here, and for that we'll start with a plane. So I'll add a plane in right here. Just gonna go into edit mode, rotate that on the X by 90 degrees. We'll scale that down quite a bit, drag it up, and actually in edit mode I'm gonna drag it down a little so that the origin point is at the top. That way we can wiggle the mustache. And in edit mode I'll add a loop cut down the middle and delete this half because we're gonna use a mirror modifier. Alright, so now let's drag this out, and we'll add another loop cut. We can also add a subdivision surface right here, and I'll add solidify, but I want to put that before Okay, now let's start dragging some of these around. So there's going to be one in the middle and one on the sides. You can see there are like 3 points right here. And I'll just try to round the top out a little bit and make sure that you're actually renaming things. So for the eyebrows, I'm just going to duplicate the glasses right here, and we'll start from the same shape basically. Change the bevel down to 1 and move that before the subdivision surface. I'll put the solidify at the beginning too. I'll just scale that down. I'll add a loop cut in the middle, and we'll just bring this down. Can actually just rotate that 90 degrees or -90, rotate this one 90 degrees and bring that down. And maybe let's try beveling this. I'll bevel it, scale it apart. Let's get rid of that bevel. This might look a little better if these are angled out. You know, basically just move these around until you think everything is looking good. So now we'll just put these where we want them. I'll set the offset to 0. And it turns out, after all, I think it looks better without the bevel, so I'll just get rid of that. So the hat will also start off with a plane. I'll just drag that up and I'll scale that down in edit mode. Okay, then we can just inset that and extrude it up. We'll add a subdivision surface. I'll do like Control-3. What I'll do first is add a loop like this and like that. To make this a little rounder, we can do this pretty easily with the Loop Tools add-on right here. All you have to do is turn this on in the preferences. So we can just select all these at the top and go to Loop Tools and Circle, and that should just turn it into a circle for us, which is pretty easy. So we'll just do that a few more times to make sure all of these are round, and we can add a loop cut down the bottom. I kind of wanted it to be a little more pointed in the front and a little flatter on the top. I'll maybe make everything a little more narrow like that. Select all these, bring them back a little, and then we can select the top and inset that and just bring that down. Now we can come through here and just edit some stuff if we think it needs to be changed. So I'll add a solidify to this, and I'll try putting that before the subdivision, move this around a little, and in the picture, the hat's tilted back quite a bit. So I'll tilt it back a little. And I like using X-ray for this because you can see where the head is and where the edge of the hat is, so we can put this on pretty easily. So that's looking pretty good. I think maybe this should be a little bigger. Just make sure, you know, the head's not popping through at all. And next we'll work on the hair, which is a little different. What we're gonna do is bring a plane. I'll just go into edit mode and extrude that upward like that. And I'm actually going to delete the top and bottom faces and this front face right here. So delete only the faces. And then I'm gonna bring this up around the head. So I'm basically just going to wrap this around kind of in that shape, in that area that I want it to be. And I'll add a subdivision surface, and we're also going to add a shrink wrap right here. We're going to make this shrink wrap to the head. If I change the offset, you'll see it puff out a little. So this is going to match the shape of the head right here. And we can kind of just place this wherever we think it should go. Maybe we'll move this part down a little. So I'll change this offset to 0, and I'll add a solidify now. Also change this to 0, so it's kind of pushing in both directions. It's going into the head and out of the head. And we'll make this a little thicker. What I'll do is check the subdivision without the optimal display checked. So I think maybe setting it to 2 is good. And I'll just apply this. We can apply the shrink wrap also. And I'll put another subdivision surface over top to smooth it out like that. We could also apply the solidify, so I'll try applying that. So we can come in here and just start pulling these points out, and this will give us some kind of like spiky hair shapes. So I'll just go through and pull some of these points around. You can kind of select them pretty randomly. And if you want to do this a little quicker, you could also use the mirror modifier. I think it might look a little better if it's like a little more asymmetrical. So now when we smooth this out, this is how it will look. It might look better with one more level of subdivision. All right, so next we're gonna model this collar right here. So for that, I will start with a plane. Just gonna drag that up, and in edit mode, we'll scale that down. And what I'll do is just delete only faces, so we're left with this edge. And with this selected, I'll subdivide it, and then I'll use loop tools to turn that into a circle. Now we can just extrude that on the z-axis. This is going to be a lot easier if we use the mirror modifier, so I'll just delete half of it, And then we'll add the mirror modifier. We'll add a solidify modifier, and we'll also subdivide that. So I'll turn this down. Now we should be able to just, separate the front like that. Basically what I'd like to do is make the front kind of triangular. And if you need more definition right here, you can just add a loop cut like that. I want to make sure that the top right here is pretty close to the neck. What we can do is just turn on clipping, so that way when we move it towards the center, the parts that are in the center don't actually go to the other side, like this one over here. And we can do that to get quite a bit closer to the neck. I just want this to be more noticeable from a distance. It's a pretty small detail, so we don't have to spend a ton of time on it. And now we'll make this cane right here, which is going to be pretty easy because we're just going to use the skin modifier. So I'll make a plane right here. In edit mode, I will merge everything to the center like that. So we're left with just one vert. Now I'll pull this to the side in object mode, so we're moving the origin point. And actually I want this to snap to the grid just to make it easier to measure. So I'll turn this to increment and turn on absolute grid snap. Now we can snap this to the grid with control. Edit mode, I'll just extrude this up, extrude this to the side, and then down like that. So we'll make this smoother with a subdivision surface modifier. So I'll turn that up to maybe like 3 levels right there. And it's kind of curving over quite a bit. So we're going to need another loop on this side to enforce it. So I'll put one right about here. If we want this to be rounder, we can just pull both of these down like that. Now we can add the skin modifier. And in edit mode, just select everything, Control A, and then we can add another subdivision surface at the end, and that should smooth it out. So that's all there is to making the cane. Now next we should focus on the materials. So I'll just get rid of this for now, and we can go into the shading workspace. So I'm going to do this the same as I did the last character, and that is using a palette. So I'll just select the head, I'll set this to my palette material. And if you want this color palette, you can download it for free from my Gumroad, and there should be a link in the description. And it's easy to set up. Basically, you just want to bring in an image texture, load in the palette that you downloaded, make sure that the texture coordinate is set to UV and plugging into the vector, and then you can just plug the color into the base color. One detail is that you want this set to closest instead of linear, because if you set it to linear, it will kind of smooth the colors out. I prefer the hard edge look right here, so I leave this set at closest. Now that we have this on the head, we can select everything else with A, Control L, and link the materials. So now they'll all have the same material. And we just need to unwrap a few of these things that were made using curves or the skin modifier. So the cane, we just have to apply the skin modifier, but you have to do this in order from top to bottom. So make sure you apply this one first, and then I'll apply that with Control A. The arms were made using the skin modifier, but that's already applied. Suspenders are already applied also. So now I'll just select these 3 things, go into edit mode, select everything, hit U to unwrap, and we'll do Smart UV Project, and I'll just set the island margin to something small like 0.01. This just makes the UV islands not touch each other. Hit OK, and these are unwrapped. So now that we have these, I will just switch this over to the UV editor, and up here, just make sure that this is set to the palette so that we can see our palette right here. I'll start with the head. We'll go into edit mode and select everything. Over here in the UV editor, we can actually see all of these, all of the faces. So we can select it here, move it around, scale it down, things like that, and it will change the colors over here. What I like to do is scale it down to 0, so it's a single point, and then wherever we move it, the head will just turn to that solid color. And I'll move that to white. We'll do this with everything else too. So just select everything, go into edit mode, select everything again, make sure everything is selected over here also, scale that down to 0, and we'll move everything over to white like that. So everything is starting off blank, and we can just go through and assign the colors. So I'll start with the head. This guy right here, I did some experimenting, and I thought the skin was looking pretty good as this like purpley color. I was kind of making the colors all kind of bubblegummy. I also want to do that for the hands, so we need to select only the hands when we're in here. So I have X-ray on, and we can just select from the side right here and hit Control+ to expand that selection. I'll select the head also, And with both of those selected, we can just move the white portion right here over to the same spot as the head, like that. Now I'd like to change the nose to be a similar color as the skin, but I think I would like it to be one step darker. Now I'll select the hair, the eyebrows, and the mustache, and we'll make these a similar color, but I want to do darker and a little more blue too. I'll select the shoes and the pants. I'll make these just like a darker red, like a desaturated red. I would like the socks to be a different color, so I'll just select only the leg, go into face select, and I'll just expand that selection until everything is selected. I'm gonna make this a purpley color also, like that. And I wanna do the straps a similar color as the pants. I think what I'll do is make the pants maybe a little lighter, and I want these two to be the same color. I could make this a similar color also, and I'll make the hat the same color as the shoes. And now it looks like the only thing I'm missing is the skin color for the neck. So I'll just select this top part right here, and I'll just move this white portion over to be the same color as the skin. I just want to do something special for the glasses to make them look a little more reflective. So I'll change this back over to the shader editor, and I'll create a new material for this. So I'm just gonna X this out right here and add a new one and change this to glasses. What I'd like to do is give some like fake reflections in kind of like a cartoony style. So for that I will use a wave texture right here, and I'll hit Control T. If you're using the node wrangler, that will just add these two nodes here. And I'm just going to change this to object, and we'll plug the color into the color to take a look at that. So with this mapping, we'll just move the Y right here, and we can change the scale to whatever we want. I think something a little lower is good, and we can choose whatever colors we want. I'll just use a mix RGB and plug this into the factor right there. Now we can just change these two colors. Hover over this and hit E, and it gives us this eyedropper selection tool, so we can just click on that, and now we have this color sampled. So I'll just copy this with Control C and Control V to paste it over to the other side. We'll make one of them light and one of them dark. I would also like to turn the roughness all the way down so we can get some reflection in there. So in the final render, I used cycles. So I'm going to switch this over to cycles from Eevee, and I'll make sure it's using the GPU. What I did in the final render was I turned the transmission up so it was actually kind of like a glass texture. And if you don't like how clear it is, you can always change this too by changing the roughness or the transmission roughness. The transmission roughness is going to make sure that these are still shiny. You get some like reflections like that, but it's going to make looking through it a little fuzzier. And if you wanted to texture paint on the face to add some wrinkles or something like that, we're going to have to make a second UV map. That's actually really easy. You can just come over here to Object Data Properties, UV Maps, and then add a second one right here. We'll just change this to face. We'll select that and open up the UV editor again. Now we'll go into edit mode and make sure that the face UV map is the one that's selected. And I'm just going to select the front faces right here and the sides like that. Now I'll look from the front, hit U, and I'll choose project from view like that. And what I'll do is just select this and scale it up. This will just give us a little more resolution to work with. So now we can switch back and forth between these two. So I'll leave this set to the first one, but know that we have this second one prepared. And I'll go back over to the shading workspace right here. So we can click this button right here and it will make a duplicate. And I want to add another image texture. And this is what we're going to be drawing with. We can add a new one right here. I'm just going to leave the default resolution. We can name this something more specific like old guy face. And we'll leave the color black because we're going to be using this like a mask basically. And I'll hit OK. Now we can preview this by hitting Control Shift and left click like that, or you can just drag the color into the surface. And right now this is completely black, and we're going to use this to draw where we want the wrinkles to be. So we'll go over to Texture Paint, and we'll draw the wrinkles with white. And you can draw directly on the face over here, or you can draw on this side right here. I prefer to draw directly on the face. So you can hit F, and that will allow you to change the radius like that. And there's also an auto smooth option if you're using a mouse instead of a tablet, a drawing tablet. So you can go to stroke and then stabilize stroke, especially helpful when you're using a mouse. So I'll just draw some lines right here. And I'm also going to draw a few down here for like under the eye wrinkles. There we go. I think that's looking pretty good. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that when you save this, the image itself will not save automatically, and you can tell it's not saved because there's this little star, the asterisk, at image. So we do need to save this. We'll go to Save As, save it somewhere you'll remember. We don't have any alpha, so we can save this as RGB, and I'll turn the compression down. Now we'll go back over to shading. I'll bring in a mix RGB. Take a look at this, and I'm gonna plug this in right here. You wanna make sure that the UV is plugged in right there also. We'll plug the color into the factor right here, and this will allow us to mix between these two colors. Oh, you know why this isn't working is because this needs to be using the other UV map. So we can do that, just bring in a UV map right here, and we can set this to face. Now if we plug this in, it should start working. There we go. Whatever color we set this second color to is going to be the color of our wrinkles. Once again, I'll just hover over here, hit E, and select the skin color. So we'll turn the saturation up so it's a similar color, just a little darker. Now when we come back over to layout, if you don't like the way this looks, you can come over here to viewport shading and change this from texture to material or object or, you know, whatever you want. When it came to rigging, I wasn't really planning on doing a very intensive rigging because I wasn't planning on animating this character. So what I did is I just brought in a rig that I made already. And the rig that I'm using is actually free to download. You can get that on my Gumroad also. Basically, I just appended that character, and then I deleted the character's mesh, and I turned on all of the bone layers and made sure that was kind of on top of our character, and I just went into edit mode and I tried to position things as well as I could so that they matched the current, the character we're working on now. I also deleted half of the bones because I knew I would just symmetrize them later, so I think this process generally worked pretty well. I think one thing that was a little harder was changing some of the foot bones because they're all supposed to be rotated in the same direction. So when you start moving them around, it can kind of throw things off. But I was still able to change like the front of the foot and the heel pivot spot and things like that. I also deleted some of the control bones that I didn't think I would use, especially because when you symmetrize bones with drivers, the drivers don't get copied to the other side, so I just deleted those. I also created a bone for the cane. So once all the bones are where you want them, you can just select everything and symmetrize them to the other side with right click and symmetrize, and everything should be copied except for the drivers like I said before. Next I just selected my entire character, the armature last, hit Control P, and I did armature deform with empty groups like that. This next part where I'm doing weight painting, it gets kind of long and tedious. So if you want to learn more about rigging and weight painting, I actually have a playlist about it, and you can check some of those videos out here. I go through this process quite a few times in many of those videos. So the lighting setup is actually pretty simple. I have one big area light up here. I have a spotlight coming from the side and another spotlight also. A lot of the time I will use an area light instead of a spotlight, but the area lights were kind of creating lights on the ground that I didn't like, so I turned them to spotlights. So this is from the light only created by the big area light up top. This is the spotlight coming from the side, so you can see it kind of just adds a little rim light around the edge right there. And same with the other side, it's just another rim light, and these are both slightly different colors. One is a little warmer and one is a little cooler. So usually what I'll do is just set up some lights to define the edges, and then I'll set up one to kind of fill everything else in like that. Alright, that's it for this one. Use the link below to shop on Sketchfab, and make sure to check out the Character Modeling Challenge on Discord for a chance to win that tablet from XP Pen. Submissions close on April 30th for that. And if you want the file that I made in this video, you can find that on Patreon. I'd like to thank my patrons for their support, and I'd like to thank you for watching. Have a good one.